Welcome to the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast, the go-to place to gain financial freedom through real estate investing. Here we interview investors, mentors, and entrepreneurs who share their secrets and advice to help you build passive income. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, this is Agostino. There are many ways to get into real estate, from fix and flips to wholesaling to leveraging into multifamily. At a high level, the formula is always the same. You got to find a good deal, improve the asset, and operate efficiently. That's basically it. Well, today's guests are very familiar with the strategy, and they've applied the systems and resources to acquire hundreds of underperforming properties and reposition them into producing high returns for their investors and their clients. As the founders of High Return Real Estate, these two gentlemen provide the tools for people to get into real estate without all the hard work and expertise by offering turnkey properties and professional property management, among many other things. Now with that, I'd like to welcome Jack Gibson and Jeff Schechter to the show. Hey guys, thanks for coming on, man.
All right, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good show. Well, if you like what these two guys have to say, you can reach them via their contact page at highreturnrealestate.com. And of course, if you like our content, please don't forget to leave a comment and rate the show. Finally, if you text the word freedom to 202-410-4202, you can receive a free ebook, The Bulletproof Guide to Finding a Broker. All right, Jack, maybe go ahead and tell the listeners about how you guys got your start in this whole real estate game.
Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've been in network marketing since I was 19. I'm 42 now. And so I read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? And Robert Kiyosaki outlined the strategy, which is pretty simple. You build a business, and he does promote network marketing, multi-level marketing heavily throughout that book and other books. So you build up this business with excessive cash flow, more than you need to live, and then you take that excess cash flow and invest it into real estate to create essentially even more passive income. So that was the plan I was, signed up for. That's what I subscribed to. I was all in. It just took me a while before I actually got to the point where I had enough liquid cash to be able to invest into real estate. So up until that time, I was kind of just investing into stocks, and there was a couple pivotal moments that made me realize that I couldn't ride the ups and downs of the stock market my entire life. One of them was I was invested into oil about 3 or 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, I should say. Oil prices plummeted. My stocks took quite a hit from that. And then another time I just bought into a stock with a company that had I knew the earnings were going to be very strong. And a major hedge fund manager, he got onto our earnings call and he asked 3 questions that would indicate to the investing world that he was shorting our stock, right? And he's done this before. So the stock dropped, by 35%, 40%, overnight, right? Just from one man getting on a phone call, asking 3 questions. And so I said, you know what, I'm not playing this game anymore. I'm not going to put my financial future into something that could happen to me just like that I have no control over.
Well, it's all speculation too, right? I mean,
yes.
Just like that. It's like it's not in your control.
Exactly. So I said, you know what? I don't want to buy and pray anymore. I want to buy and know. So with real estate, it's such an amazing asset class, because you can buy an asset and you, generally speaking, as long as you do your due diligence and buy it right, you know about what kind of returns you're going to get. I mean, of course, it's going to fluctuate a bit from there. You're not going to be able to perfectly predict it, but you're not going to have this huge volatile swings like you do in the stock market. So it was about 5 years ago, I started looking around at cash flowing markets throughout the US. Indy was 3 hours from my house. It was on the top 5 of all cash flow markets in pretty much every major publication about cash flowing real estate. So I said, okay, took a trip down there, toured with a property manager, bought a property, and then the returns were excellent. So then I just started, continually buying, more and more property. And then I started getting really excited about it. So I started selling to my friends and family, this idea of turnkey. And so I referred 5 million in business my first probably 18 months. And I realized, wow, there's really a demand for this type of investment. Like, people are really if I can do this with friends and family and colleagues in my network, what could I do if I could scale this up? And it was at that time, I was getting digital marketing coaching from Schecky for my MLM business. So I put the pitch on him, so to speak, and said, hey, I need a partner to help me scale this. And, the rest, they say, is history. Schecky took the bait, and now we're 50-50 equity partners.
Schecky took the bait.
He took the bait.
But I'm sure Schecky doesn't regret it.
I think he does at times. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a tough start. I mean, there's a lot of challenges a lot of things that we have to do behind the scenes to get a property ready for an investor. And it's probably a little bit different. When Jack was selling to his own network, there's already automatically some trust built up. So, with a market that doesn't know you, obviously, we leverage the internet and we have a lot of content out there, but there has to be built-in trust, but there also has to be a lot of transparency. And so we really work hard to document everything that we do, and we continue to dial that in even almost 4 years later. And it just never seems to end. So I would say, yes, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm certainly thrilled with what we've built, and I'm even more thrilled about where we're going. But there have been a few moments where if you had asked me, if you had to do it all over again, would you start this business? There have been a few moments I would have said no.
Right.
I mean, a lot of moments.
Yeah, it's been really challenging. The thing that I think that most investors don't really understand is that there's a lot of garbage and a lot of charlatans out there in real estate land. It's unfortunate, but there's some really great people. I'm not saying that to take anything away, but it's just one of those arenas where it's very, very easy to hide things. And even to people like us that are what I would call well-seasoned investors. And so we've been kicked in the teeth quite a bit and have learned the hard way. And almost everything that we do for our customers is to prevent them from getting kicked in the teeth.
Right.
That's really the best way to say it. So it's kind of a negative spin, but that's just the reality of how things work.
Well, it's you have to cater to the cognitive biases, right? I mean, we're gonna be very risk adverse, and people are always looking for the least amount of risk possible. Just as Jack just said, to me, stocks are very risky because you have no control, right? Yeah. So what are you gonna do? Get out, go do real estate, go something you have control over it, right? And that's the reason why. And I think that by providing the type of value you guys are doing, you're finding an asset there locally, right? Turning it, handing it off, and handing off to the owner along with proper property management. It's a no-brainer, and because I think and we talked a lot about this in the green room. Because you have a separation of duty between yourselves and the property managers. There's also the property manager can also talk directly to the owners and say, yeah, this is a real property. I saw it. I was just there today, and here's an actual check from the tenant. Here's an actual lease, as opposed to some of these other, just like I said, charlatans, Schecky. There's one that we all know of. I'm sure down in your neck of the woods, at least there was anyway. I'm not sure where he is now, but yeah, it's like there's plenty of them out there. You really have to maintain a high degree of transparency for sure.
Yeah, we're familiar with all the aforementioned players.
Very familiar.
That's right. Well, now tell me a little bit about your business model then. So you're finding the assets that are locally in Indianapolis, right?
Yeah.
So maybe go through like, how do you guys find an asset? Like what sort of work are you putting into locating the asset, and what are you doing to that property to make it better and then basically hand it off? Like how does that whole thing work?
So we typically operate in sort of C+, B- neighborhoods. We're mostly in the central area of Indianapolis. We work with a couple gentlemen, brothers, that actually have a very successful wholesale business too, but they've become I guess I would say like kind of working acquisition partners for us. So, we pay them a small amount to help us source good properties. But, we're on all the lists, and we have a lot of relationships with other wholesalers and hedge funds, and lots of ways that we can acquire properties. But, essentially we just work backwards. So it's pretty simple in that we go, well, we know that the investor has to have at least this much kind of return after the property is already rehabbed. So we're going to go in, we're going to scope, we're going to take. We also have another guy that is the lead for one of our many contracting teams that we work with. And that particular guy has also got an engineering background. And we actually go in with him when we look at properties and do the best job that we can in terms of assessing that property's condition and getting a pretty good guess as to what it's going to take to rehab the property to the standards that we require, which are very, very high. So we'll, make an offer, we'll buy a property, we'll then immediately come in and, get all the utilities turned on. And in many cases, we'll actually bring in a third-party inspector right then before we even start a rehab to say, look, we want another set of eyes looking at this project to say, what exactly does this thing need? And does it need plumbing, electrical, roof, whatever? And then we'll, from there, develop our scope of repairs. We will then assign that to one of our contracting teams along with a checklist that's ridiculous. It's like 200 and something items long. So we'll include the inspection report and we'll include the checklist to say, all these things have to be checked. Go ahead and work through it. Give us, your best number as far as what it's going to take to rehab it. We'll assign you the job. You go through it. You let us know when it's done. I mean, we're obviously monitoring progress, and there's all kinds of, payment schedules and things that work with the contractors at that point. And we've got an incredibly long checklist internally too that we follow to make sure that things are all happening the way that they're supposed to. And then when they say, yeah, we're good, we're done, great, we will then call in another third-party inspector and ask for a completely new inspection. So we're saying, okay, we want to check everything out. And invariably, there's always a couple things that come up. I mean, obviously, the inspectors are trying to justify their job, their career. So they got to find stuff that's wrong with the property. And look, it's real estate, and they're typically older properties. There's no way to make a property perfect. We're trying to do the best job that we can to make sure that there's really no real exposure to the investor in terms of future big repairs, things like that. So then we say, okay, it's good. We then turn it over to our property management partners, and they come in and do another layer of quality control. They do what's called a habitability test. So they're checking all the little silly things like, do all the doors open and close correctly? Do the locks turn? Do all the windows? Things that contractors are typically going to ignore, and things that also typically that even the best inspection companies aren't going to catch. So because they're looking at it now in terms of what is the tenant seeing? I'm going to be living there. Is the water pressure good? Does it feel nice to take a shower there? Does the water get hot enough? All that kind of stuff. So they're then sending us another bill at that point for the final habitability test. And then they're going in and, they're putting in appliances and making sure all that stuff is ready to go. And then it starts to be marketed to tenants. And that's at that point where we start reaching out to our investor base and saying, hey, we've got an opportunity that's coming up. And deal with the numbers. So essentially from a math standpoint, though, we're working backwards, and we're saying the only way we can really acquire this property is if we get it for X. Because if we buy for X and we put in Y and Z, the contractor's payment and then the final property management payment, we have to get to a point where there's still enough meat on the bone for us to make a living, which is sometimes difficult, because there's sometimes surprises and things like that come up in rehabs. But is there enough meat on the bone when we look at the cost of the property to the investor, and more importantly, the price to rent ratio? Can that work out for the investor? And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's actually simple what we do, but there's a lot of moving parts.
Right. I mean, but it also sounds like you really have to have enough margin in there, right? I mean, yeah, you're picking these houses up for pretty cheap if you're going to have to do all that work. I mean, it depends how much work you have to put into it, but I mean, I used to do this stuff many years ago, a long time ago. So I know there's a lot of margin has to go into it.
Yeah, we typically, I mean, like a fairly typical deal for us is, let's say like a really, obviously the properties that have the most, what I would call opportunity to do this, are the more beat up properties, unfortunately, because that's where you're going to get the bigger discounts. So that's why we have to have all these crews and good rehab process and things like that. But let's say like a little, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 8-10 minutes from downtown, simple little single family home. Let's say at a rent for, maybe $750, $800. Hopefully we're picking that up something for, say, like, $25,000, $28,000. And then we're putting, maybe another, 12 to 15 in it, maybe more. And hopefully we're in it for, say, like, I don't know, high 40s by the time we get done, maybe 50. And then we turn around and sell it for 60. So it's not like we put a lot of markup in it. I mean, we try and make, $10, $11, $12,000 on it. Sometimes we make less for all that work. So I think we're doing a really, really good job in terms of the value that we offer to the investor. Because, you use the words California. So, typically somebody living in California in a more expensive market, even if you said, hey, I want to do this forced equity plan, I want to do a BRRRR from long distance, or I want to do a rehab from long distance, they still got to come in and have those relationships and economies of scale and all the contractors in place and the property management team in place. And we've had many of investors that said, well, I think I'd rather do this and figure it out on my own. We're like, man, go ahead, Yeah. And invariably they end up paying more than what they would have paid us for our markup. So, go have fun with that stuff, because we're not working on big margins. We make a living because we do a lot of volume. That's really, it's not a big secret. I mean, we have to do a lot of deals every month in order to make this model work. So there have to be economies of scale going both ways.
Well, yeah, just to throw in another thing of what the value we offer is, how many contractors did we have to go to that screwed us out of thousands and thousands of dollars to get to the trusted 4 or 5 that we have today, that we know they're going to do good quality work at a fair price to where we can make this happen. Most investors that are coming from out of state, if they try to go into this market to try to figure out and find their own contractors, I mean, they're going to be paying, significantly more than what we would pay, which essentially is the markup that they could have just, paid us to take care of everything for them. Or worse, which happens a lot, they're not going to get the quality of workmanship that they paid for.
Right.
So we went through that. It almost took our company under. So that's the danger for out-of-state investors.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, there's an event I just went to a few weeks ago, actually, in California is where it was. And these people were investing in Detroit, which I would never recommend. Sorry if anybody from Detroit's listening. But they're basically doing single family, exactly what you guys are doing, but they're trying to do it on their own from California.
Wow.
And turning a unit. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can get severely burned. So absolutely. I mean, the value that you guys seem to offer is that it's all handled, it's all turnkey. You even line up the management, which is huge, because like I've said already numerous times, it's easy getting into a deal. It's hard running it for 10 years straight profitably. That's hard. Yeah. That's hard work. Yeah. It's easy getting in. It's hard running it.
That's for sure. And, also to put an asterisk on what Jack said too, I think, the other issue that we sort of do a good job in comparison to somebody trying to do it on their own. You got to remember too, we're sometimes buying 10, 12, 15 properties at a time.
Yeah. So
we have a reputation in Indianapolis, like we'll buy fast, we'll close quickly, we'll pay cash. Everybody knows who we are. So, the guy from California that comes in that wants to buy 1 or 2 properties, every single time is going to be paying a higher wholesale price for that property than what we pay. So it's really just the history and the relationships that we've developed and the systems that, pretty much absolves us from the markup that we're making.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, conceivably, by the time you guys get control of the asset, turn it around, mark it up, line up the management for someone out of state wanting to get into this business, it would have been about the same anyway.
Well, or more, because
or more. Yeah.
The other thing you have to understand too is timing. So recognize too that our end investor is only buying after the property is complete. Whereas if they're doing it on their own, they're buying the wholesale property and they have all the hold costs. Maybe they're using hard money, I don't know, but they have all those hold costs, and sometimes those projects can go out months and months and months, and they're flying back and forth. And I mean, that property that I mentioned before, that typical property, we're ripping through the rehab in 2 to 3 weeks. And that property gets to market in a month.
Yeah.
And it's done, and it's been through every single process. And the other thing is, our contractors they understand they're on the hook for that final inspection. So, which is a very rare situation out there in contractor land. Contracts typically are like, this is what I'll do, and then you pay me to do it. But there's no guarantee that it's going to pass any kind of inspection or anything like that. You're just paying me to do what we agreed that I was going to do.
That's right.
And that's it. But our guys know, hey, look, man, there's a full inspection coming, so you may as well get it right the first time. We'll give you the advantage of the other inspection up front, so you know what's probably coming. But that's a very, very unusual situation in contractor land.
Yes. Now, management is a real big part of all this too, right? And so typically when you're doing like a single family type scenario, I guess, depending on who the management company is, some of them don't want to do smaller assets, but I mean, there's sometimes paying 10%. I mean, is that typically the going rate out there then?
Yeah.
And maybe you can clarify too, you guys are not running the management anymore. We talked about that in the green room too. You handed it off to another group that's handling it for you, which is great because there's separation of duties anyway there. So, which is good from a protection standpoint. But maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the management and what they do. I know you mentioned it earlier on this call, but maybe talk a little bit more about what sort of things does a management company actually handle, and maybe some of the fees and stuff like that you're aware of.
Yeah, the management is, makes or breaks the investment after you buy. I mean, that's what you got to have, a great team behind you to get the property and to produce cash flow. And we've seen some really incredibly terrible and even fraudulent management companies like you alluded to. And then on the other spectrum, you got the company that we're partnering with, Great Jones, which is a high-tech and high-tech touch company. They got the best of both worlds. So they've got about 12,000 doors under management in multiple markets. So they have the economies of scale. Their venture capital funded is their backing. So they've put a team attached to our account, and they've got pretty much a player for every part or system that we do in property management. So they got somebody on lease ups, they got somebody on onboarding new clients, they got somebody to turn on utilities, they got somebody to go out and do field visits. I mean, they got like just multiple layers of employees. So we figured, and we are very sure they've even confirmed it, the amount of bandwidth and employees that they've thrown at our account, they're losing money on our account right now. So they're invested into us in the hopes that they build up this, big account, right, that has volume, and then they can get it cranking and create more of a passive income for their company as well. So to be able to do that, you're like us to be able to do what they do, it's just virtually impossible. We can't do it. We don't have the resources to be able to do it. So as far as fees go, pretty typical. I mean, 10% of rents is what they're charging as of right now. First month's lease up fee. There's a renewal fee when they renew a lease. And then what we were most attracted to with this company is that they don't upcharge at all. 0% gets charged onto maintenance, repairs, or any tenant turns, rehabs. And in C-class, that's where most property managements make their money. They can't survive on 10% of rents, and the lease-up fee is just not enough on a $600 to $800 monthly rent. You just don't have enough income coming in.
Right.
So without that upcharge, the owner, the investor that we're trying to get to maximize their cash flow as much as possible, they're in a much better position to be profitable on their property when, they're not paying all these excessive, sometimes double the typical what it actually costs. They're paying double that in markup from the property management company. And not that that's bad. Like, I'm not saying to mark up maintenance, repairs, and tenant turns. There's nothing wrong. It's not bad. It is part of the normal business. It's just with this company, they don't have to do it because of their systems and economy of scale. So it's really, really amazing to be able to know that when we sell the property, that we're turning the property over to a very professional team that has the investors, best intentions at heart.
Yeah. But I guess, you know what, if they don't want to have a manager, they don't have to, or bring in their own management. But I mean, one thing that I used to be really big on is actually holding the note. So basically I pay cash for it, or I arrange for some other financing, hand it off to basically do owner finance type deal. The buyer's putting down $20K or whatever on the $50,000 asset, like you mentioned, Schecky. And next thing you know, just collecting that passive income. Well, conceivably anyway, they're not going to kill the property because they own it, right? I mean, I'm assuming you must have some of those deals going on too, right?
Are you talking about like a rent to own with the tenants?
Exactly.
We haven't gotten into that. It's come up a few times. I see the advantage of it. It's done in Indianapolis, but every time we've looked at the model, unfortunately, it's kind of a big screw to the tenant. And it's not something that really helps them. They get pretty screwed on that deal. And in order for them not to get screwed, at least financially from what we've seen, there's not much benefit to the investor at that point either. So to date, we have shied away from it. Now, Indy's going through a bit of a renaissance, and we're obviously seeing some upward price pressure as any big city grows. But as yet, we have yet to see rents come up commensurate with that price pressure. So we know that's coming. And I think once that happens, that may be worth re-looking at those formulas. But for right now, we're just straight, we just do straight rentals. And the property, like I said, gets sold to the investor. The investor has a tenant that's professionally managed and money is collected and everything works out just fine. We have had a couple of investors reach out to us and ask about the rent to own. But like I said, every time we've looked at it, it's just never been quite as juicy as it sounds at the onset.
Well, I think that, what you're doing, Agostino, is like, that's great. Probably what you're doing is really a win-win for everybody in certain markets. In Indy, I mean, what we found too is that most of the tenant base, they don't have the ability to come up with, the $5,000-$10,000 even to be able to put it down. So that's probably the bigger issue is, and what Schecky was kind of alluding to, is it just doesn't work in our market. So, we get people that have, we got somebody that 700 credit score, but they had trouble coming up with, the security deposit, right? So that can happen. So overall, just hasn't really worked.
Yeah, I think we'll see, the opportunity for that to happen is coming up, because what's happening in India right now is we'll have a rental property that is, bringing in $750 or $800 a month. It might even be a Section 8 tenant. And it's right next door to a flip. That was maybe a $60,000 property. And it's right next door where somebody's doing a flip and they're charging $189K for the property right next door. 2 doors down from that is a boarded up property, right? So it's just amazing some of the mix and change and stuff that's going on here. So as the city gentrifies, yes, we're going to see more people that have the ability to put that big number down and maybe do a program like that. We're just not quite there yet.
Right. Now tell me a little bit about how you guys are coming up with the investors. Like, how are investors finding you? It sounds like your internal processes are great. You got good management in place. You got a turnkey solution. How do investors, which I'm assuming are mostly out of state at this point, how do they find you?
Well, we just put out a lot of content. We have a podcast as well. It's called the High Return Real Estate Show, and we talk a lot about buy and hold investing. We have a pretty strong presence on YouTube and other social media channels. We've actually gotten a lot of business, mostly from SEO, and for people that don't know what that is, it's just short for search engine optimization. So we rank very high for a lot of important keywords like, turnkey investing, things like that, on the major search engines. And then they go to our site and they see what we're doing, and we explain what we're doing, and we display our available properties on our site. And there's forms that they can fill out to reach out. But we've also developed a nice email list of people that are interested in buying from us, and we send out emails regularly about opportunities that are coming up. And so almost everything we do is digital. We do a little bit of direct mail too, and that's been somewhat effective, but even the direct mail typically gets driven back to our website. And we have a very, very personal approach. Like, we don't sell to anybody that we haven't talked to. We have an amazing woman named Nicole who runs our investor relations department, and she and her husband are investors themselves. They invested with us. That's how we met them. And she speaks with everybody that's interested in doing business with us, and just, get a feel. Let's see what, is what we're doing congruent with what you're trying to do. Because as any new business owner can relate to, at the beginning, it was like, man, we'll just sell to anybody. We just need deals, right? And
that sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, we were just pretty much total sluts in that regard. And now it's like, okay, we're getting a little bit smarter in terms of, hey, let's make sure that, what we're doing, because, not everybody necessarily wants to be in C class. I mean, it's a little bit rougher ride. It requires strong management. We have that in place, no problem. But, you get into some of the real estate forums and some of the newer investors, it's very easy to tell the less seasoned investors, because they're more interested in that perfect, pretty property. And they're more easily seduced by numbers, whereas a more seasoned investor is going to go, the numbers are important, but I want to see your processes. I want to understand what you're doing. I want to understand the rehabs that you're doing. I want to see the third-party inspections. I really want to know that I'm getting a solid property. Whereas, it's different things to different levels of investors are what becomes sexy. So we start to see a delineation between the two. And so we're just wanting to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because when they are, it's really great. Like, we have a really fantastic relationship with our investors. We've developed trust in them. They've developed trust in us, and it works out beautifully.
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, you know what? I mean, we raise money for syndication deals, right? So we do big multifamily deals, that kind of thing. And it's not for everyone. It isn't like just throw money at it, and every quarter is we're not going to throw checks at you every single quarter. Roofs need to get replaced once in a while. Might have a problem with a bunch of units. Maybe there's a fire. Things happen, right? So you have to make sure that you're vetting out your investor, the person's going to slam down that money, because if you guys don't get along, this goes with any type of investment, then you got to deal with it, and they put a bad name out for you. That's the last thing you need.
And not just that, like for us, if somebody, let's say, this is a good example, us versus you. If somebody was, say, a control freak, or they want to have a lot of control, great. Buy your own single-family home. You can make all the decisions moving forward about when to replace that roof, what to do. When you do syndication with somebody like you, it's like you're handing off the reins to somebody else to make all those decisions. And
that's right.
It's a fantastic investment. I mean, I think syndication is great. I'm not taking anything away from it. But I'm saying it speaks to what kind of an investor you are. And if you really want to have those controls, don't do syndication.
That's right.
Not a good fit.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And that's what I tell people is that get into the game. If you want to get into this game, get into a game. Buy your own house. Go do a turnkey deal, syndicate, whatever it is. Just take action and do something, because if you have money just sitting by the sidelines, not doing anything, that's not good for anybody. Most of all you.
Yeah, it's especially with the way inflation is going. It just keeps
If I personally had it all to do over again, every hindsight's 2020, isn't it? But I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. Like, this is a tough business. Schecky and I talk about it. Very challenging to do what we do. To buy a piece of crap property and to then take it, through all the processes and the problems and challenges that come up on each property. And we have to do volume business. I mean, we need to do 10 properties a month for us to, outpace our payroll and our expenses and marketing and all of that, so we can make a living on this. It's very, very difficult. I would just do what I was doing before, the MLM business, keep focused on that, growing that, and invest into, passive income properties, just like turnkey and syndication. I would turn my money over to guys like us and say, have at it, let it rip,
right.
And I trust you. Just go, and don't call me unless it burns down.
But that's why it's like, the value that you guys bring to the table is great for someone that wants to get into the game. A vetted out property that is already running and turnkey ready to go. Literally, they buy it from you guys and away you go. That's it. You're not to man. I mean, to me, for someone to get into the game, if they don't want to syndicate, yeah, it's absolutely. They're getting that free cash flow. Why not? Why not? It's great. Super. So, Jack, I think you already partially answered this thing, but maybe you can go into a deeper dive. Now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self then?
Oh man, that's great. Well, I mean, I've made lots of mistakes. Gosh, there's so many things I want to go back and like just shake me and be like, God, don't do it. I think that, look, I mean, of course, there's a lot of mistakes that I've made that I regret, and in all areas of my life. I mean, I don't think I'm human, and I'm not immune to making stupid decisions, right? But I don't know if there's a lot I would actually change, because I think that who I was when I was 20, I needed to go through the processes and the problems and the challenges and the mistakes that I made to get to the person that I am today. So if I go back and I get to tell myself how to avoid all those, lessons and learning opportunities, then I'm shortcutting a huge amount of personal development. So it's an interesting way to look at time travel, right? Like, I wouldn't want to go back and do anything differently. Although I would certainly want to at the same time, right? Because none of us like pain. I think the biggest thing I would say is, trust but verify. That's where we got into the most trouble, we put our trust into people, into partnerships, where if we would have just verified them more, maybe been more cautious, maybe done some background checks on them, we would have realized that like they were scorpions. And you know what scorpions do? No matter what, where you put them, who you put them with, they stay.
That's right. How about you, Schecky?
Well, first of all, I love what you said, Jack. I think that's a really great way to put it. Just learning the lessons, it's important. The advice that I would give myself is probably just because I'm such a dang old fart now, is just start sooner. Don't be afraid to fail forward and fail faster. To me, it's taken me a long ass time to learn some of these lessons. And I know that I could have been in a lot better financial position than I am now had I failed faster and learned those lessons in a little bit more accelerated way. I like Jack. I'm happy for the lessons. I just wish I wasn't so dang thick-headed and take so long to learn them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but part of it is that we've also been conditioned not to fail, right? When we were growing up and you're in grade school, you did your test, and if you answered one question wrong, there's a big magnifying on what you did wrong, magnifying glass, and it's like, oh, look at that, you get an F now.
Yeah.
And that's you got to deal with it when you get home with your parents and all that. So now we're conditioned, don't fail at anything ever. And I think it drives people, that kind of stuff drives people to fear, honestly. It really does.
Yeah, and I think that, the more enlightened people on this planet, that's changing. but it's also tempered by, the helicopter parent effect too.
Yes.
Like you still get, there's still a big piece of our society that's teaching their kids, like they're just going to always be there to pick up after them and make sure that they don't fail. And it's like, to me, that's just like not good parenting. Like, it's not teaching that kid how to survive in what could be a very, very cruel world if they're not prepared for it.
That's right. I mean, that's why you just got to jump in and find a good deal. Don't be stupid. Partner up. And we talked a little bit about that. Find a good partner if you don't really know what you're doing. Bring something to the table. Follow up and execute. That's what it comes down to.
I was just gonna say, as far as your grade school analogy, the one thing that sticks out to me is I've always been directionally impaired, so I had a really hard time figuring out north, south, east, west, where are they at on the map. And my 5th grade teacher said, you got it wrong because you couldn't spell a 2-letter word. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, we. So I was like, oh, west is left, e is to the right, right? Because it's we. So I'll never forget that, because I made that mistake. He pointed out the mistake and I learned from it. And I think that's how people learn. Like you make mistakes, and you get the biggest learning lessons from making those mistakes. I think you just want to make sure that the mistakes you make don't knock you out of the game. As long as you're still able to stay in the game, then whatever that game is, right? The business that you're in, or the marriage that you're in, or the partnership, or whatever. It applies to so many areas of life. But if you can stay in the game and not get knocked out of it, then you're going to learn from that lesson. You're going to grow. You're going to be stronger, and you're going to be better, as long as it doesn't kill you.
That's right. All right, guys. Well, if you want to reach out to Schecky or Jack, check them out on their website, highreturnrealestate.com. Hope you got a lot of good value out of this discussion. I certainly did. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having us.
This was great, Agostino. We really, really appreciate you having us on the show. This was fun.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast.